Hey everyone, and welcome to the Cheyenne Hills Podcast, Verse by Verse. We know it's often hard to find time to spend studying God's Word, so we're happy you can join us as we read, unpack, and discuss Scripture every Tuesday and Thursday. We hope you enjoy the program.
Across the street and around the world, Cheyenne Hills.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Genesis. As we're going back to Genesis, guys, this story of Joseph has had its ups and downs, and and we're going to see some ups here again. It's just an incredible journey. We were talking about that last time, of all the journey he had. But there's also, I've noticed some consistencies, and one of those consistencies is his cloak got him in trouble. Remember when he was younger, 17 or so, right? His dad sewed together this colorful cloak, a coat of many colors, and his brothers were jealous of him, of his favor with his father, and they thought, hey, let's take it and let's rub this, let's show that he had some blood on it, and he got eaten by the wolves. But anyway, his cloak kind of was a part of the getting him in trouble, at least part of it.
Yeah.
And in the case of Potiphar's wife, his cloak was also a part of getting him in trouble. He was a handsome guy. He was raised to power. He was a person of position and authority, and he was attractive to look at. And so Potiphar's wife went after him and said, I want you to be with me. And he took off and left his cloak. And I just think this is interesting because there's going to be one more cloak that he's going to wear, and this next cloak is a cool one, but we'll hold that for later. But I just think it's cool to see some of these consistencies of they call it the Hebrew narrative. And narrative, it is a story that is told. And with that story, and I believe it's a true story, but in that story and the way it's told, there are things that we can learn about just about every turn, because we can compare that to our own journey. And I think that's what we're going to see here. So here we are, Genesis chapter 40, verse 1. Then it came about that after these things, that the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was furious with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, in the jail, the same place where Joseph was imprisoned. Now, remember last time we were wondering if this is a special prison, and apparently it is.
Yeah.
It's for the high ups. When you guys mess up, the cupbearer of the king, that's a big deal. Can you explain to us what a cupbearer of the king does and why he's important?
Well, I mean, I don't know the nuances of Egyptian cupbearers, but generally it could
be different.
Yeah, I mean, and probably a lot of similarities. But the cupbearer was to prevent poisoning of the king. I mean, it's like if somebody was going to off the king, then let's slip some poison into his drink, and well, they would assign a guy who would drink of the cup beforehand. So it's like, oh, I guess he's okay. Well, okay, now
they'd wait a few minutes to see if he would keel over.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
Yeah.
I just think that's a wild, and that kind of tradition kind of continued on through, even through England, I think, in the Kings.
Yeah.
But then the baker, why the baker? Do you think? I don't know. Because he could have baked in some bad stuff, and so the baker had to be very trusted as well, right?
Yeah. Anybody that would be close to Pharaoh or to any high officials would really need to be trustworthy. And
they could have laced the jam.
Yeah.
That's so you have to
a special recipe for you.
No, that's just powdered sugar on top of that, King. Don't worry about anything.
Not arsenic. No,
don't worry.
Well, or maybe he was just picky. I mean, I've always wondered, what is it that made him so mad? I mean, maybe he just was the guy, had the pancakes just weren't as fluffy as they should have been. They didn't have whipped cream, so gone with you.
Well, what if that? No, I hadn't thought about. You made me think of something else. Maybe he didn't feel good afterwards and thought something got through. Verse 4, and the captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them, and he took care of them, and they were in confinement for some time. Then the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the jail, both had a dream at the same night, each man with his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning and observed them, behold, they were dejected. And he asked the Pharaoh's officials who were with him in the confinement in his master's house, why are your faces so sad today? Then they said to him, "We have had a dream, and there is no one to interpret it." Then Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, please." So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream, behold, there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine there were 3 branches, and as it was budding, its blossoms came about, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand." Then Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it, and the 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 or more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to your former custom when you were a cupbearer. Only keep me in mind when it goes well with you, and please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house. For I was, in fact, kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that should be put me into this dungeon." So we get to know a little bit about the place. It's a dungeon. It's not a very attractive, wonderful confinement, but it's a dungeon probably in the king's house. Interesting to me that, hey, yeah, just tell me, I'll know it. And he didn't have to go pray about it or ponder it. He just knew.
Yeah.
Does that not seem weird to you? It's interesting to me.
Yeah, and that's unusual from a lot of other dreams in the Bible. I mean, with Daniel and stuff,
They go and pray about it. And,
yeah. But here it's just like, oh yeah, I know.
Oh yeah, that's 3 days and you'll be back, and you get your job back. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so I read down to verse 15. Now let's keep going, I guess. So when the chief baker saw that he had interpreted favorably and said to Joseph, "I saw in my dream, and behold, there were 3 baskets of white bread in my hand. In the top basket there were some of all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, and the birds were eating them out of the basket in my hand, on my head." Then Joseph answered and said, "This is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 or more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you, and you will be hang on a tree, and the birds will eat from the flesh of you." I mean, that's a pretty tough
And he didn't
message.
He didn't soften the message at all.
No
That's
kidding.
like, he just,
It's almost as if it's, the way it reads here is like, okay, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to be hung, and the birds are going to eat your hair. It's like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Can't you sugarcoat this a little or anything? Crazy. Verse 20. Thus it came about on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all the servants, and he lifted up his head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cupbearer into Pharaoh's hand, cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had interpreted them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Now, this is kind of interesting because this is the first case we get to see where Joseph said, "Hey, I went out of here, and this is my ticket out. I'll do you a favor. My God's going to interpret your dream. And so, by the way, remember when you get on the other side." I think that was his motive for asking God's favor, possibly, so he could be sprung out of there. Mm-hmm. I do think it actually springs him out of there, but not in the timing.
Yeah.
And which is another theme of life. I mean, if you get, Joseph had one timing. Now,
right.
God had a different timing, and it was wait, and that's pretty true in our lives as well. Anything you guys see in this passage?
Well, I have just a technical thing on there. When we hear about hang on a tree, we think we're out here in the West. We think of like, oh, you get the rope and you throw it up over the tree. That's a Western.
Okay.
So oftentimes in Middle Eastern, when they talk about hanging on a tree, it's actually impaling.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that's what my version says, that he was impaled on a pole.
Yeah. And I mean, the Assyrians with the relief on the siege of Lachish, which is in the British Museum of History, it shows the Assyrians where they have people they captured, and then they have him either they're skinning them alive outside the wall, and they did that, for psychological that to terrify the people inside. I'm sorry, this is maybe a little bit too much information, but then it also shows impaling. And
wow.
that was kind of more the common way than when
hanging,
we read hanging,
we sound like a Western.
Get the rope and make the noose
and that was intimidating, but an impaling was, I mean, it sent a strong message.
Oh my gosh.
Of who was in charge.
Oh my gosh. Well, obviously the baker must have proved out that he did something really bad. He might have tried to kill it, you think?
Yeah, something.
Because the king must have felt something and figured out, okay, it wasn't the wine, it was the food, because other people got sick too, or the baker. Maybe. I mean, why that's a strong.
No, that's a good.
That's a strong statement. Don't bake bad bread for the king.
Well, and also in past, we've seen how the Lord gave them this dream. So you have to wonder. There must have been some kind of condemnation on this baker that, the Lord saw that he was guilty, or the Lord. I'm guessing, but obviously that dream came from somewhere, whether it was his personal guilt or God bestowed that on him, but it proved to be true.
So on your birthday, you get either exalted or hanged or impaled. That's wow. That's but it's kind of a crazy story.
The baker must have been reticent about sharing his dream. Because it says with that when he saw, where was it? Wasn't it when he says when he saw that the
it went well for the cupbearer's dream.
Yeah. So then he said, "Hey, here's
let
mine.
me tell you mine."
Yeah, but I wonder if it's like, ooh, I don't know. I'm kind of scared about my interpretation, but it's like, oh, that one was a good one. Let me.
Yes.
And so then he volunteers his, and it
did not sneak through.
No, and
I really do think the baker must have been guilty of something. And and the king figured it out. God knew it. Told the dream spot on, and the baker was caught.
Well, I think it's really interesting what you said about timing, because we know the rest of the story, but oftentimes in our own lives we don't know.
Yeah.
And God has a way of weaving that all together. And if he would have gotten out right then, his purpose, the path may not have been as clear to him as when he was waiting for God. Or God had a special way of waiting until Pharaoh had a dream.
Exactly.
And so I really like what you say about timing is on our side of the wall. We don't understand what we're waiting for.
Yeah. Well, and then what we're going to see is that this guy does remember. The cupbearer remembers. But, think about this. I don't think we get how powerful a king is in that day. You do not mess up in the king's presence. And to go up there and ask him something, hey, here's your wine. I tasted it's good, and you can see that I've tasted it, and it's good. Oh, by the way, there's this guy. They're not going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Even if
that's a good point.
It's just like this could cost him his life. But then there was an occasion,
right,
that we're going to see next time. The occasion was Pharaoh had a dream, and he goes, there was this guy. Now we have a conversation.
Yeah.
Before his job was, you take a sip of that and give me the cup after you take a drink if you're okay. That's your job. Don't go advising me.
Right, especially how he had just been sent to jail, and he came out. He was like, I'm not risking anything for that.
For sure. I don't see this as the cupbearer doing anything except, it's like, he's asking me to do something completely out of protocol. I just got out of jail. I'm not gonna. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I see. Lots of nuances of this story, isn't there?
Yeah.
To try to unpack
and all the backstory.
You gave me a king size, I don't know, impaling. That's tough. Wow, that hurts. That hurts.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. I can't imagine. Honestly, I can't imagine that.
And even the hanging of Haman and Esther, that probably was impalement.
Is that right?
Yeah, rather than hanging on the rope.
Man, that's hardcore. Wow. Yeah. Well, on that happy note, I'm glad you joined us in Genesis. Hope you're learning something as we're plowing through this. These stories, God doesn't pull any punches. It's just it's all there for us to see, and we see the highs, the lows, and it's just a whole lot like life, isn't it? So anyway, thank you for joining us. I hope you have a very blessed day. God bless you all.